Going on YouTube? Cloverbell's here, back with another Scarlet Violet video, and today we're going to be talking about Gastrodon. So guys, listen, if I had to give you an excuse, to use another water type besides Urshifu-Rapid Strike, use Gastrodon. This is a Pokemon that it always finds itself back in the meta. I can't think of a competitive format where Gastrodon didn't have a role to play within that format, right? So, imagine again, this was on a lot of Sword and Shield teams, towards the tail end of the game, right? And now all of a sudden you go to Scarlet and Violet. It had a role, in Regulation A and a little bit of B. We didn't really see it in C so much, right? But now all of a sudden it's back again in Regulation D. And, there's a few reasons why, and mostly it's because of this ability called Storm Drain, right? Now, again, if you don't know what Storm Drain does, is it basically, it gives you water immunity and it lets you go to +1 in terms of your special attack when you have an incoming water move, right? And if you just think of the prominent water type right now that's running around, it's of course the Urshifu-Rapid Strike, right? So then when Urshifu-Rapid Strike clicks Aqua Jet or Surging Strikes, guess who you get to switch into that and then get a boost, right? So now Gastrodon gets a +1 boost, and now all of a sudden, this base 92 special attack stat can actually do some pretty considerable chip damage if you can position correctly in front of the Urshifu, right? And then typically some of these sets include Ice Beam, all right, and then as well as Earth Power, right? Ice ground coverage is really, really good against a lot of what's running around right now. It hits a lot of different things, okay? And then from here, these last two slots, it really just depends on how you want to run it. But you can always just use Yawn, okay? Which is, a lot of pressure, in Sword and Shield because the Dynamite, you get to Yawn things, put them to sleep. And then even now, where what Yawn does is, your opponent has to make a choice, right? Do I switch out? All right, and then in exchange, I'm basically taking free damage into that slot because my opponent is likely to double into that slot, into my switch. Or do I take a chance and then, do as much as I can with my one turn before I go to sleep, but then the next turn, I'm pretty much asleep, and then they get to ignore that slot and then focus on the other slot, right? It's a tough choice sometimes, right? And which is why a lot of Pokemon with Yawn are very, very useful, right? It just all depends on the set. And they're very good on bulky Pokemon, right? Because they get to stay on the field and just spam it, right? And keep forcing you out of position until they get the position that they want, and then they can just sweep you if they have good setup Pokemon, right? And that's usually how it's done. You always want to pair a Yawn Pokemon with a setup Pokemon because, sometimes you tend to struggle to try and get up setup Pokemon, safely. But Yawn can do that. So imagine for example, Galarian Moltres, okay? Moltres, unless it has something like an Amoonguss on the team or some kind of screen support from Grimmsnarl, then the Moltres, sometimes has a little bit of difficulty in getting up Nasty Plot. But now with this, it actually can do it relatively safely, right? Because you have redirection support from Rage Powder. You can always rely on Grimmsnarl screens, take the bulk, take the hits because you have the bulk from the screens. And then Gastrodon can just create good positioning with Yawn because they have to switch out, and then the turn they switch out, you can just go for Nasty Plot, for example, right? So that's an example of how you can use it. But then think about what else Ice Beam can hit. It can hit the Genies, Landorus dies, Tornadus dies, the other Thundurus dies, right? And not too many people are using Enamorus yet. Dragonite, again, like I said, is another one that falls basically any of these Dragonites, any of these Dragons, I should say. Zapdos, another one, can drop, but Gastrodon is here to stay. And then all of a sudden you can always go with something like Terra Fire, and then now even Rillaboom, a very, very strong Pokemon against Gastrodon because of its 4x weakness to grass. Now all of a sudden Rillaboom has trouble because now you can't even click your grass moves against this because of Terra Fire, right? So it really just depends, right? And then this is something that was done before. Remember Gastrodon Grimmsnarl with Justin Knox's team? We featured him on the channel previously. But he won that tournament with Gastrodon, and it got 15 seconds of fame, right? And then we never really saw Gastrodon within that format again. But now, again, it's starting to be used just because Urshifu-Rapid Strike has a hard time dealing with it. It has to click Close Combat, and then if it does that, then you're just dropping your defenses, and then you can just get you can just die to the Gastrodon, right? So what we're not really gonna like build around Gastrodon, but what we're gonna do is at least just show you like different teams that have been utilizing it lately, and just to give you some ideas on how you can use Gastrodon on your own team. So let's take a look. Okay, so let's take a look at Resu's team. So this is another tournament, and again, 5-2 result is pretty good. And right away, we already see the Gastrodon with the Fire, Water, Grass core, you know, rounding out Rillaboom and Hisuian Arcanine. So you get Intimidate support, and then Rillaboom is a good switch into some of those grass moves that Gastrodon doesn't want to take. Terra Ghost is actually pretty cool. Rocky Helmet, very good against physical attackers. So imagine like Urshifu, Chenpao, Dragonite that want to be hitting this thing. Now just Rocky Helmet, just such good chip damage. Then you have Recover and Protect. So now you have sustainability, right? And anytime Gastrodon has sustainability, it just gets super annoying in terms of being able to try and remove it, right? And then over here, you just have your aggressive options with Chenpao, Roaring Moon, and Flutter Mane. And here, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Look at this. So now you have Dragon Dance, Roaring Moon, right? So now what you can do is, if this thing had Yawn, now you can potentially set up this Roaring Moon, you know, with Dragon Dance and or Substitute. But this is one way to get around Trick Room, by the way. You just alternate your Substitute and Protects. I'm not sure about Haze at the moment, but hey, I mean, it's still a very viable move on Chenpao. But again, you get the idea. You just have like very strong options, and you're backed by this, you know, bulky core of like Gastrodon, Hisuian Arcanine, and then, you know, the Rillaboom and or Amoonguss, right? So this is one way to go about it. Gastrodon's really good. Like, think about like what Urshifu can do here. Absolutely nothing, right? And I feel like Gastrodon is really good as a support for Hisuian Arcanine, because, you know, the Arcanine 4 times weak to the water, right? So, you know, you just swap in your Gastrodon or position your Gastrodon next to it, and then you're kind of just okay there, right? Then if we take a look over here, in the Trainer School Regulation D tournament, Bobby, who we looked at his team before on a previous video, but again, 4-2 results. This one features Galarian, Moltres, Amoonguss, right, and Gastrodon. It's funny how we just also had that 4 on this screen over here, which is kind of like how I like to play it. And then you just slap on Hisuian Arcanine, and then here's a Flutter Mane here, right? So this is pretty good as well. So here's Nasty Plot. Yeah, all right, missed opportunity with the Yawn here. But again, Acid Armor, by the way, is just another way to use the Gastrodon here, because then what ends up happening is kind of like the Goodra concept. You know, you just can't break it, right? Because it just keeps getting to +6, and then it just keeps chipping you away with like Earth Powers and Ice Beams, and it's getting recovery with leftovers, right? And then you just can't really break it, and eventually you just like, all right, that's it, I'm done. And then, you know, you get the redirection, the screens, and the Arcanine with the Will-O-Wisp and the Intimidate. This is a very bulky team. It supports the Flutter Mane well. It supports the Galarian Moltres well. I really like this. If I had to use a Gastrodon team, I would probably just use this. Like, this is just the way I like to play. I would just do this. So shout outs to Bobby02, wherever you are. You got the Cloverbells kind of Gastrodon team. Then if we take a look at some other teams here, again, this is from VGC Pace. So shout outs to them for, you know, the repository. But this is a team that got 5th place on another tournament, Gardevoir 3710. So again, we still have Gastrodon here, Amoonguss, and Volcarona. So another Fire, Water, Grass core, all right? And again, it's passive, it's recovery, right? So sustainability with Storm Drain, leftovers, and then it's Earth Power, Ice Beam. And then this is a Bolt set, which is actually really good. And again, here's the Flutter Mane Landers combination. They both support each other relatively well. Rocky Helmet on the Amoonguss. You know, just entire team is just bulky, right? Like, besides the Flutter Mane, of course. You get some decent speed control with Rock Tomb over here, of course. And then Iron Hands, you know, fake out pressure, you know, able to help set up the Volcarona. This is actually a Volcarona team if you look at it, right? Because Fiery Dance, Bug Buzz, Giga Drain, Quiver Dance. So this is set up, all right? So another really cool way to utilize it. But again, you'll just find these Gastrodon teams on a lot of these Fire, Water, Grass cores. But then over here, which might be the coolest team of them all, this is a tournament winning team with Gastrodon from the Terra Square. And if you look at it, it's got Cresselia, Grimmsnarl, Hisuian Arcanine again. Then we have another Iron Hands, and then Roaring Moon, like we saw previously, right? So this one has Yawn, and if you look at this, this has a lot of different setup mons that can really capitalize off of the opponent trying to switch out of Yawn. So, for example, this is Calm Mind Cresselia, right? Calm Mind Cresselia can get scary, right? You might think like Cresselia is a bulky Pokemon and doesn't do a lot of damage. It can if it can get a couple Calm Minds up, and then you just surround it by just spamming Yawn and screens, and then how do you break this Cresselia? How do you even break the Gastrodon, right? And then at the same time, you've got Arcanine here coming in, pivoting, you know, Intimidates, right? Iron Hands coming in, and also having Swords Dance here. So Yawn Swords Dance, you can also position with that. And then at the same time, Roaring Moon with Dragon Dance. Okay, so it's actually looking really, really cool here. And then like, just overall, 3 setup Pokemon: Calm Mind, Swords Dance, Dragon Dance. I'm not sure if that's overkill, but like the fact that you have multiple options that you can utilize and help set up, all right, is just a really, really cool concept, okay? And this is something that I expect to see, you know, moving forward in some of these big tours coming up. There's like a Beanie Brawl tour later tonight. And then there's another, you know, Nino Pokebros tour with a huge tournament prize, right? So, and then there's also Victory Road coming up. You know, I won't be surprised if I see Gastrodon, you know, within those top cuts, right? It's just a really, really good Pokemon into the meta at the moment. All right, it's hard to break, especially behind these Grimmsnarl screens. You know, this is just the way I would use it, you know, at least with this 4, just off the top of my head. You know, I really like Bobby's team, but again, I just showed you some different ideas with it. But yeah, this is pretty much what I wanted to discuss. So again, like if you haven't used Gastrodon yet, and if you're tired of using Urshifu-Rapid Strike and you hate going against it, right, use Gastrodon. I feel like it's a really, really good Pokemon right now. And it was slept on up until this point, but people are starting to use it again. All right, but that's what I want to say for now, folks. You know, we're not going to really do like a full team building video. I just wanted to bring your attention to use this Pokemon. You know, it's a championship level Pokemon. All right, so go for it, use it. You won't regret it, I promise. We'll be back with another video in the next one, folks. Peace out and have a good one.